All right, let's jump right into one of the most intense, most debated passages in the entire Bible, Matthew chapter 24, specifically verses 29 to 35. Now, for centuries, people have looked at this chapter and seen a clear roadmap to the end of the world. But what if that's not what the original audience heard at all? We're going to break this down, verse by verse, and explore an interpretation that's rooted not in some far-off future, but in a very specific, very dramatic historical event. Okay, so let's get right into verse 29. It kicks off with this incredibly dramatic, almost cosmic language. The sun goes dark, the moon stops shining, stars are literally falling from the sky. I mean, it sounds like the whole universe is just coming apart at the seams, right? And Jesus says this happens immediately after a time of great tribulation. So the first question we have to ask is he being literal? And really, that's the absolute heart of the matter. Are we talking about the actual, physical stars winking out and our sun going cold? Or is Jesus using a kind of powerful, symbolic language, a type of prophetic shorthand that, his first century audience would have immediately understood? Well, the source material we're looking at makes a really compelling case that this is classic prophetic language. If you look back through the Old Testament prophets, whenever a huge kingdom was about to fall or a powerful ruler was overthrown, the prophets described it using this exact kind of cosmic imagery. The heavens shaking and the stars falling was basically a metaphor for total political chaos down here on Earth, the collapse of the powers that be. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. When you take that symbolic idea and you lay it over the actual history of that time, wow. The period between Jesus' prophecy and the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD was complete and utter chaos. The historian Austin Farrar paints this wild picture of Roman emperors, who were like the sons of their world, being assassinated one after another. The ruling families in Judea, the Herods, were in constant turmoil. Even the high priests were being violently overthrown. The source argues that these were the quenched suns and the darkened stars Jesus was talking about. So, after all that political collapse, let's see where it goes next. Verse 30 says, "A sign of the Son of Man will appear, and everyone will see him coming in the clouds." Now, this is another one of those phrases that has just fueled endless speculation. Is this the final physical return of Christ? And here we are at a major fork in the road for interpretation. For a lot of people, coming in the clouds can only mean one thing: the literal, visible second coming at the very end of time. But there's another powerful way to understand it, and it's one we see elsewhere in the Bible. Coming in the clouds can also be language for a divine judgment, a symbolic coming in power against a specific nation. In this case, against the very nation that had rejected. And this next point is it's absolutely crucial. When Jesus is on trial, he looks the high priest Caiaphas, the guy condemning him, right in the eye and says, "Hereafter you shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds." Just think about that for a second. He wasn't talking to us thousands of years in the future. He was speaking directly to the men who were about to have him killed, and he told them that they would live to see his vindication and their judgment. So the whole point here is that this coming was a coming in judgment that his own accusers were going to witness. And that completely reframes the phrase, "all the tribes of the earth." Suddenly, it's not about the whole planet, but all the tribes of the land of Israel, who would mourn as the Roman armies acting as God's instrument came down on them in 70 AD. Okay, so what about verse 31 with the angels gathering the elect? If we stick with this historical view, it's not talking about the final rapture of all believers. Instead, the source suggests it's referring to the divine message, that angelic warning that went out to the Christians in Judea, telling them, "Get out of Jerusalem before the siege starts." And what's incredible is that historical records from the time actually confirm that's exactly what they did. They fled. Now, just to make absolutely sure his disciples understood the timing, Jesus gives them this simple, brilliant parable. He basically says, look, when a fig tree starts putting out new leaves, you don't need some special revelation to know that summer is right around the corner. It's obvious. He's saying in the exact same way, when you see all these things I've been talking about, the wars, the chaos, you'll know that the end I'm describing is right at the door. The message here couldn't be clearer. It's all about immediacy. These were not vague clues for some far-off, distant future. No, they were specific, observable signs that would tell his followers that the judgment he prophesied for Jerusalem was right on top of them. It was imminent. And then Jesus just drops the hammer. Verse 34 right here is probably the single most direct statement about timing in this whole chapter. He says, "Verily I say unto you," which is ancient speak for listen up, this is the most important part, "this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled." Not some of them, all of them. So let's actually put that on a timeline. Jesus is speaking around 34 AD. The war kicks off in 66 AD, and the city and its temple are completely destroyed in 70 AD. That's a span of about 36 years, which is squarely within the biblical definition of a generation. Everything he warned about, it happened within the lifetime of the very people who heard him say it. And, this wasn't just some isolated comment he made. As the source points out, just one chapter earlier, Jesus had stood up to the religious leaders and warned them directly that the judgment for centuries of rebellion would fall squarely on their generation. The consistency of his message is just remarkable. He then closes this whole section in verse 35 with one of the most powerful declarations of certainty ever spoken. He's pretty much saying that the physical universe itself is less permanent than the prophecy he just delivered. Mountains can crumble, stars can fade, but these words will happen exactly as he said they would. So when you walk through these verses with their original historical context in mind, the whole picture really does shift. You go from seeing literal cosmic events to symbolic political ones. And you go from a distant future to a specific fulfilled past. This reading sees the prophecy as having come true with stunning accuracy in 70 AD. And it leaves us with a pretty big question. If these verses found their fulfillment in the 1st century, how might that change the way we read other prophecies that still seem to point to things yet to come?